Hey Cake Chums, and welcome back to another video and the final instalment of my Mr. Baker's Cakes Cake Basics series. Today we're covering, see what I did there? Covering cakes. Let's get to the video. So if you haven't yet checked out the first 2 episodes in my mini-series, do be sure to go check them out. I will link them down in the description box below and probably up in that corner. Episode 1 covered how to bake a cake, which is quite useful if you're making one. And episode 2 was all about how to torte, fill and crumb coat your cakes. In today's final episode, I will be demonstrating how to achieve a perfect finish using ganache, which can also be applied to buttercream, of course. And then we'll also be covering the cake with sugar paste, also known as fondant, or ready to roll icing. I must just slip in a little apology for not uploading last week. It was actually my birthday week, and unfortunately I was feeling rather poorly too. So as I didn't really have much of a voice, I thought I'd give you guys a break from me. But we are back this week, and the cake that we're going to be finishing is actually my own birthday cake that I'll be taking to a get together with my friends tonight. So I guess we really should get on with it and get it made. So just like at the end of last time's video, I have a cake here that has been cut into layers and then filled and given a crumb coat using white chocolate ganache. I have a bowl here of even more white chocolate ganache that I'm going to be using to do the final coat. Now if I was planning on serving this cake just using the white chocolate ganache, or buttercream of course, then this would be the final coat, and I would go on quite thick with it, because what we can do is use a combination of a regular edge scraper that you saw last week and some of these kind of flexi acetate smoothers to make sure we get that really pristine finish. So the plan is that we'll do that with this cake, then we'll also go on to cover it with sugar paste as well, so that we can cover both of those skills in one video. It really isn't too scary to do this. I think a lot of it comes down to kind of nervousness and fear. I always joke that sugar paste can smell fear. Obviously that isn't true, but it is just kind of keeping calm, not panicking, and knowing what to do if things start to go wrong. Now I've just given my ganache a little bit of a blitz in the microwave because, again, at this time of year it does like to set up quite quickly, so don't panic if you find it's going a bit hard. Just give it a bit of a spin in the microwave, literally for a few seconds, and then stir it around. It should come to a nice smooth consistency. And then what I'm going to do is just use this to go over the cake, which has been chilled in the fridge for about 30 minutes, one more time. Now we usually say when we're making ganache that we're aiming for peanut butter consistency, and you will see that mine is a little bit thinner than that, but don't panic. You'll find that as it goes on to the slightly chilled cake, it will set up quite quickly. The only problem you might find, if yours is as loose as this, is that you might need to do a couple of layers to get it to go completely opaque, if that's the finish that you are after. The good thing about having it quite loose like this is that it means it's an absolute dream to smooth. So just like in the crumb coating video, I do like to start by going around the cake, going up and down with my palette knife, just to get a nice, smooth, even layer, like so. Not being particularly tidy at all, just making sure that ganache has gone all over the whole cake. And then doing exactly the same on the top. It's about angling the palette knife or the spatula. You'll notice that as I'm doing it, I'm twisting it backwards and forwards, first of all, to drag the ganache around. What we'll do once we've got that nice even coverage is we then switch to holding the palette knife quite steady, and then we rotate the cake, and that's how we ensure that nice flat top. We go around that top edge because it's quite easy to miss that, just ensuring we've got a nice even layer. And then I like to switch straight to my edge scraper, and you can see that because the cake was chilled, the ganache is starting to set up already. I'm going to put that straight back into the bowl this week because all those crumbs have been secured in the crumb coat and none of them should be coming through at all. Take a little bit of extra ganache if you need to and just fill any kind of imperfections, any holes that you may have. You can see this ganache that I've already scraped off is already coming to that peanut butter consistency that we were talking about. It works so fast. Really, it's just a case of taking your time, building up those layers, and then scraping off any excess, and again going back in and just adding a bit extra where you need it. When I've kind of got the cake to a place that I'm almost happy with, I like to then switch from the usual edge scrapers to one of these much thinner, flexible acetate smoothers. And I'll put the link to where I got these ones from down in the description box. What I find with these is they just allow me to kind of smooth out any of these lumps and bumps that you can see I've got without taking off anywhere near as much of the ganache. So if I come and do it around here, let's see if we can find, there you go, so this imperfection here, I just run over that a few times, hopefully you can see that it just smooths it right out, leaving you with that perfect finish that we're after. Now the trick to avoiding all these kind of seams where I've started with the smoother is to try and do as large a sweep as you can in one go. So I like to wrap my arm right underneath this stand and then turn it around so that I've almost gone right around the cake and then sweep it off, and then you just end up with the kind of the one mark where you removed it, which you can barely even see actually in this case, rather than lots and lots of them. And then square off these edges holding either your palette knife or your scraper kind of flush to the top of the cake and just scraping them in towards the centre with the aim of either blending them into the top or scraping them off and removing them entirely. And then just like on the side with that smoother, holding it still and twisting the turntable round to smooth out those imperfections. Now another way you can do this is using a metal scraper. If you get a small bowl of really hot water, as hot as you can do, ideally from the kettle, you can put your metal smoother just resting in it slightly, and then the heat in your smoother will actually melt the ganache, allowing you to get a really smooth finish as well. I have been known to do that if my ganache isn't behaving, but I'm hoping that today, just by using my flexi smoothers, I'll be able to get the sort of finish that I'm after. Now you might notice that you can still kind of see some of the cake through the ganache here, and if I was doing a cake where I didn't want that to be the case, it would just be a case of letting this chill for a bit and then going over it again with yet another layer of ganache. Because I'm going to be covering this with sugar paste, I'm not going to be quite so worried about that. Instead, I'm going to concentrate my efforts on getting some nice super sharp edges at the top here, so that when I come to cover it with sugar paste, I can carry those on. Don't worry too much if you ding the centre when you're holding the smoother, that happens. Again, we can just smooth that out, no problems at all. This is one of those times that patience will absolutely pay off. And as I said in last week's video, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so I can stand and do this for ages, ages and ages. I also find it's one of those things that on your own cakes, you'll be like, nope, still not happy, nope, still not happy, and yet on anybody else's cake, you wouldn't notice all of the kind of the little marks and things that can remain if you're not 100% perfect. I'm just the same with any of those kind of rustic style buttercream cakes. I always feel like the rusticness looks too contrived, and yet on anyone else's cake I wouldn't even question it. I think my mind can't cope with things being informal. Okay, and I'm going to stop there. As I said, I could keep going and I could make it even more perfect, but ultimately the only person who's going to notice any imperfections in this is me. Everybody else will be absolutely fine with it, and that's the same goes for your cakes as well. As I said, if you are aiming for perfection, you can just keep going back over it again and again, another layer of ganache, another layer of neatening until you reach the finish that you are after. But for now, I'm going to pop this back in the fridge for about 10 to 15 minutes just to allow that final layer of ganache to set up. And while it's doing that, I'll get to rolling out my sugar paste. Now, the cake that I've actually made today isn't a lemon cake. So we did lemon cake for the baking a cake video, and we did lemon cake for torting, filling and crumb coating. But today I've gone a bit rogue, and I've actually done a apple crumble cake with salted caramel buttercream, and then it's got some, I never know how to say this, dolce de leche? Dolce de leche, is that right? Apologies to like everyone I've offended if I've said that wrong. And then some crushed up Lotus Biscoff biscuits in there as well. And then as you've seen, that's all been covered in white chocolate ganache. And then I figured, as we've gone kind of all out on the taste for this cake, I might as well go for a flavoured sugar paste as well. Yes, that is a thing. At the end of 2019, Renshaw launched their new marshmallow flavour sugar paste, and everyone I know that's tried it has absolutely loved it. So I figured, why not add to the kind of the taste sensation of my birthday cake by adding even more flavour. So we're going to be using this today. It comes in white. Of course, you could add colour to it, but today I'm going to keep it white. If you're really good, I might pop in a little video at the end of how I'm going to decorate it to take to my friends tonight. As you know, I have a stainless steel workbench here, which is perfectly good for rolling out sugar paste on because it has no kind of imperfections or anything that can grip the sugar paste. But I do also like to work with a non-stick board, which you have seen in my previous videos too. Grab that over. I have them in a variety of sizes, but for rolling out today, I'm going to be using the biggest one. Now, to stop your sugar paste sticking when you're rolling it out, there are two things really that you can use. You can either use icing sugar, which I keep in a handy little shaker right to the side of my workbench, or you can use corn flour, and I tend to use these in these little pouches. You can buy plastic ones like this one from Wilton. These ones are made by Purple Cupcakes, or you can make them yourself using just a brand new clean J-cloth or a bit of muslin fabric. You basically just put some corn flour inside and then you can dab it on your workbench. I tend to use icing sugar if I'm going to be working with marzipan underneath the icing, simply because I've had somewhere before that if you mix corn flour and marzipan, it can cause it to ferment and go mouldy. We don't want to risk that. So yes, icing sugar then, but the rest of the time, if I'm literally just putting sugar paste straight onto a cake, I do prefer to use the corn flour. One of the biggest mistakes you see people who are not familiar with it making are they don't need it to get it moving before they try and use it. Yes, it's called ready to roll, but that doesn't literally mean from this form here. Whoops, this block. What you want to do is really give it a good knead to kind of soften it up and get it moving. Now, when you are kneading your sugar paste, you want to kind of almost be folding it like when you're kneading bread, but then pushing away from you, kind of over the direction that you fold it, because if you're kneading it, folding it and then kneading it together, what you can do is trap air and you'll get lots of air bubbles in your paste. I will show you what to do if that happens. Oh, I always get out of breath when I'm kneading sugar paste. It shows how unfit I am. But you basically want to get it to the point that it's nice and soft and malleable. And then what I like to do is just fold all of those seams underneath so that when I roll it out, I have a nice, smooth surface to work with. So I'm going to give the surface a nice, very generous dusting of corn flour and the paste as well. To roll out the paste itself, it's about keeping it moving. So doing a roll in one direction, turn the paste, roll again, turn the paste, roll again. By keeping it moving, you're going to stop it sticking to your board, but you're also going to stop it kind of ending up being long and thin. We're covering something round, so we want our paste to be nice and round as well. See that I'm using my whole arms to give me nice big rolls. I'm not just using my hands. And if you do find yourself getting some air bubbles like I've got over here towards the edge, you can use a brand new clean pin, or acupuncture needles are even better. Put a little hole to the side, slide your finger over it, push the air out, and job done. Now one of the things I like about the Renshaw Extra Paste is that it is very elastic, it's very forgiving. So if you're somebody who struggles with sugar paste that tears, or you get that awful dreaded elephant skin going on, then something like Renshaw Extra is going to be a lot easier for you to use. But again, it is just about becoming more confident with it. The kind of, if you don't allow it to kind of warm up properly because you haven't kneaded it enough, or you've changed the consistency too much by using maybe too much icing sugar, things like that can all cause you to have problems with your paste. When you've got it to kind of a thickness that you're happy with the Renshaw Extra, I usually go for about 3 millimeters. It's going to be time to lift it and apply it to the cake. It's going to need something to help it stick to the cake, and so what I like to use is a little cooled boiled water, and I will literally just take a brush. Do ignore how skanky my brushes are looking, I do need some new giant ones, and I'm just going to give it a brush all over with that water. Not so much that it's kind of almost dripping off, but enough to make sure that the entire cake has got some water on it, because it's the water that is going to make the sugar paste sticky and help it to stick to the cake. Making my way all the way around, and again, just like last week, you'll see how useful the turntable is for stuff like this. So if you don't have one, highly recommend you pick one up. They are not expensive at all. And then when I'm happy, I like to just take a little bit of kitchen roll and run around the board to take off any excess water, because of course I don't want the paste to stick to the board, I just want it to stick to the cake. Now, huge tip, never try and cover a cake on a turntable, because any excess paste that you have is going to hang down and pull on this top edge of the cake, which is either going to damage it and make it harder for you to get those sharp edges, or it's going to cause the paste to stretch so much over that sharp corner that it's going to rip. We don't want that to happen, so we're going to take the cake off the turntable, put that to the side, put the cake flat on the workbench, and then to lift the paste and place it on the cake, I'm going to take the rolling pin, fold the paste over the top, and then lift it up actually on the rolling pin. At this stage, it's about working quickly and working efficiently. So I move this back a bit so you can see what I'm doing. The first thing we want to do is make sure that this top is sealed. And so I'm just going to run my hand on it, pushing any air that is trapped onto that paste to the edge, lift up the paste and push it out. Then I'm going to switch to a fondant smoother. This one is by PME. Classic tool. And I'm just going to run that over the top nice and gently, just to ensure that it is completely stuck and completely sealed. Next, we want to make sure this top edge is sealed as well. So I'm running my hand around the top of the cake just to ensure that this paste is stuck. Once you've done that, you don't have to rush quite so much, because if it's going to tear or damage, that's where it's going to do it. So moving the cake around, making sure it's nice and stuck on that top edge. And then when you've done that, it's just about working your way down the cake. The best way to describe how to do this is almost like when you're kind of fluffing out like a wedding gown. You know, when you're like someone's bridesmaid or something like that, and they're posing for their pictures, and you fluff out the dress so that it spreads out nicely around them. That's exactly what you need to do with your sugar paste. It's like you fluff it out and then run your hand down. Fluff it out and run your hand down. And what that does is it avoids it creasing as you attach it to the cake. So fluffing it out, running your hand down. So I'm still just working my way around the cake and down the cake. And what happens where I'm fluffing it out, it's also stretching the paste. You'll see that the paste is starting to build up around the bottom, and that's because you're thinning it out as you go down. If you did find that when you put the paste on the cake and you didn't have enough at one side, don't panic too much, because you might find that as you do this stage, you end up working the paste down so that you do then have enough to fill any gaps. There's a video on my Facebook page where I actually had that issue. I had a bit of cake where I didn't have enough paste, but by the time I finished smoothing it all down, I did. Almost there. And that will do for now. Now next up we want to trim some of this excess paste away, and quite often you'll see people doing this on baking shows where they go around the bottom with a pizza wheel. I'm not going to do that, and there's a reason why, which I will show you. I start by making a very rough cut, leaving myself about ½ inch of paste excess around the edges. And that's because I use something called the upside down method to finish sorting out my sugar paste. And that's exactly what it sounds like. I'm going to take my cake and flip it upside down to allow me to work the paste around this corner to make it super sharp and neat, which is kind of all the rage for cakes at the moment. I take a piece of acrylic, so just plain food safe, so it's not been used for anything else at all. Acrylic plastic. I dust the top of my cake very generously with corn flour, and I put the plate on top. And then the scary bit happens. I'm going to put one hand underneath, one hand on top, and flip it over. And then lift the board that the cake was assembled on off, and I'm going to bring that paste up over that edge, like so. Now if you made your cake on a smaller cake card, this bit is even easier, but unfortunately I tend not to do that because I don't plan ahead unless I'm doing a tiered cake. But what we're going to do now is use one of my favourite cake tools, which is called the Sharp Edge Smoother, and this is by a brand called Cakes by Carol, and again I'll put the details down in the description box below. What I love about this tool is, just like this tool here, it allows you to smooth the sugar paste on your cake like we did, but it has a right angle, which means that when I hold it next to my cake, it's going to make sure that I don't push my tool in at an angle, thereby giving me a cake that looks like this or looks like this. It's going to make sure those sides stay super, super straight. It is simply a case of just running the tool around the outside of the cake. If we start by pushing the tool right at the bottom here, or against what is essentially the top of the cake, it's also going to push that sugar paste into that really sharp corner that everybody is desperately trying to achieve on their cakes at the moment. So this is my preferred way to do it. It can be very tempting when you're using this tool to want to really push down hard on this top as well. Because we're pushing here, it's like your hands want to do the same as each other. But don't do that, because what you'll end up doing is kind of pushing and distorting the cake itself. Essentially, cake is still very soft. It doesn't like to be pushed and shoved around too much. So do try and resist that temptation. The hand is there purely to keep it steady, not to push down with any sort of force. So I'm pushing against the cake with my other hand, the hand that's holding the smoother, and I'm just running it backwards and forwards around the cake itself. And then I'm just going to twist and keep spinning it around, purely focusing on that bottom edge at the moment. Now another thing we want to do is make sure that the cake is not sticking by kind of giving it a bit of a wiggle, because otherwise we could find that the cake gets stuck. Because this one's covered with ganache which has been chilled slightly, you can do that with your hands, but if this was a buttercream cake you wouldn't want to risk that, it would be too soft. So it's better to kind of do the wiggle. When you're happy with that bottom edge, then we're going to do exactly the same thing but move our hand further up so that we're pushing that pressure actually against the side of the cake instead. That will then ensure that we have that nice kind of smooth side as well. Got a cheeky little air bubble there, but just like when I was rolling out the paste, just pop it to the side with the needle, push the air out, and it will vanish. If you do find that you develop any kind of imperfections at all, you can also switch back to the acetate smooth that we were using before. These are designed to allow you to buff out kind of any imperfections. So you can also use this to work your way around, just neaten things up. I find the two of them together allow me to achieve much better results than I ever used to achieve trying to do this by hand using a normal smoother or a couple of these in combination. That's just me, and that's, you know, different strokes for different folks. You'll find that some people swear by these, use them exclusively, and that's great. If that works for you, absolutely brilliant. Kind of my Cake Basics series is very much designed for people who are new to cake decorating, and therefore shortcuts like this tool absolutely make life so much easier. So yeah, if you're finding it tricky working with these, or you haven't tried using these, you just want something nice and simple, that sharp edge smoother is perfect. When you've got the cake to kind of a state that you're happy with, it's time to remove this excess paste that has built up as we've been pushing it up to the top of the cake with the smoother. To do that, I'm going to take a sharp knife and I'm literally going to drag that knife into the centre of the cake, not in a sawing motion, because if I put it outwards, you're going to pull the paste off the cake. You just want to push that knife parallel with the top of the cake into the centre. If you find that you're getting any paste building up on the blade itself, take a clean bit of kitchen roll or a cloth, wipe it off, and then carry on. And then you can just lift that off, dispose of it, and you have that nice clean edge again as well. Last thing I like to do is give it one more quick sweep around using my sharp edge smoother, and then this cake is ready to be transferred onto the final board. Now, if this was going to be an elaborately decorated cake, I would always have covered a cake board as well. So whether that's a board with some sort of finish on it, like a wood effect, a stone effect, or even just a kind of a colourful board, I'd always have done that in advance. So at this point, I can apply that straight onto the cake, flip it over, and then I don't have to worry about lifting this cake again later on. Because this cake is purely just for some of my friends to enjoy with me tonight at my little birthday get together, I'm not going to go to all that effort. Sorry friends. Instead, this is just going to go onto one of my reusable cake boards, and all I'm going to do is put a little bit of my ganache on there, put that on top of the cake. I'm going to crouch down and check it's nice and even. And when I'm happy, just like before, one hand goes under here, one hand goes under here, flip, place it gently down and lift off the acrylic. And hopefully you will see that we are left with a beautifully covered, straight-sided cake with those lovely square edges as well. To get rid of any excess corn flour from where we had it on the top there, you can just take a large clean food safe brush and brush it off like so, and then your cake is ready for decorating. And so there you have it guys, that is how to cover a cake in sugar paste. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed finding out how I take my cakes from baking through to covering in sugar paste over the last 3 weeks. And now that we've got the basics nailed, I hope that you are looking forward to getting into more complex projects with me over the coming months. In the meantime, if you haven't yet subscribed to Mr. Baker's Cakes here on YouTube, please don't forget to do that using the red button down there on the right. And if you have already subscribed, you can also ring the bell to make sure you get a notification of every time I upload a new video. I've got something really exciting coming up next week, which is all about a trip I took this week. So stay tuned for that, and I will see you next time. Take care, guys.